Thank you so much, Taylor. It's really exciting to be here and see so many people joining us from around the world. We are over half the world population. We are under 30, most of us on this call, and we're primarily also located in young countries across Asia and Africa. So we know that the need to transform how the UN thinks with young people has never been more urgent. And I'm so glad to have this conversation with our ASG, Felipe Paullier, and also Prachi Shevgaonkar from India, which I'll introduce in just a minute, because we know that traditional platforms often provide limited access. And when they do, it's often too late to make real impact. So we here, I know those of us on the call are ready to take that impact forward. There are so many challenges we face around the world, and we really have an opportunity with the Summit of the Future coming up in September to turn our aspirations into action, building on commitments that were made at the 2022 Transforming Education Summit and the 2023 SDG Summit, while we laid the groundwork for this World Social Summit that's coming in 2025. So the global gathering that's happening in September may seem far away, but we're already talking about it today because we believe it's a true stepping stone to building our future. And I'm really excited to have this conversation as a moment where we can reflect, looking back, but also looking forward. So without further ado, let's have this conversation. Today, we have the inaugural ASG for Youth Affairs of the United Nations. We also have Prachi Shevgaonkar, who's the lead Next Generation India Fellow, and myself, UN Foundation lead Next Generation Global Fellow. And I would love to start with asking a question I've been dying to ask you, Felipe. When I was in school, I applied for a scholarship saying that I wanted to work at the UN. And I can now say kind of my dream has come true because I try and help young people access the decision-making spaces, including the UN. So I would love to know, what did you dream when you were younger? And now, in the role that you have, how has it come true, allowing you to bring young people's voices to not only inform, but also shape actionable outcomes of the Summit of the Future?
So thank you, Inés, Prachi, and Taylor. For me, it's a pleasure to be here and to join everyone that is joining online. So it's good morning, good afternoon, good night. I'm sure it will depend where you are from and where you are watching us. So thank you for this question, which is, of course, personal, but I think that somehow it reflects that every of us have some background, some history, and there are a lot of things that that happen that bring us where we are now. No? And in my case, my background is a bit different than maybe for someone that is working in the UN. No, I'm not a diplomat. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a public affairs officer. So I'm a medical doctor. I'm a pediatrician, actually. But when I was starting to study medicine, there was something that somehow changed a little bit how I see things. Because when I started, I studied medicine in the public university in my home country. I'm from the Latin America region, a very small country called Uruguay. And when I get into the university, I got involved into a students movement. And being part of that students movement and bringing into the conversation and to the decision-making processes of the university things, and seeing how things can shape and can change when young people are involved, it somehow put that in my DNA, no? And that's maybe not possible in a biological conversation, but in somehow I feel it's part of me now, no? So for a long while, I was doing both. I was involved in politics at the local level and then at the regional level, and in somehow always pushing and believing in the importance of bringing young people into the conversation. Because I've experienced it myself. When you're involved, things can change. So I'm here now, and I'm very excited where I am. So I have the responsibility of leading the newly established United Nations Youth Office, which is a specific team and a specific office that has a task to advance on youth affairs within the United Nations across all the United Nations pillars, no? So peace and security, human rights, sustainable development. And this is something huge. So I think it's my turn now. and I do like this is a dialogue. So my turn is to get into the conversation, Prachi. So I would like to hear, Prachi, from your experience as an innovator yourself. So what innovative approaches would you like to see the United Nations to adopt that more young people are able to participate and engage in shaping its agenda and policies?
Absolutely. I think the first innovative approach, I believe, is for more and more young people to know about you, Felipe, because we don't know that people like you exist who can be a central part of how the UN functions. And I say that because my journey also began in a silo. It began in a small corner of India as a young girl, asking myself, what can I do to fight climate change? At that time, UN to me did not seem accessible. It seemed like only world leaders and scientists and people who hold high positions can become part of the United Nations dialogue and agenda. So instead of starting from top, I started from my home. I wondered, I took a challenge to reduce my personal carbon footprint by 10% that year to fight climate change. And as I started doing that, something very interesting happened, which is that a lot of people around me came and said, we want to be a part of this. What I realized is that everybody wants to be a part of making change. They just don't know how. And so we built a mobile app called Cool the Globe, which would mobilize ordinary citizens to start taking climate action in their day-to-day lives. And if there's one thing I've learned from this journey is that, I've got a chance to interact with thousands of young people, and all of them have a zeal and a yearning to make a difference. I think to capitalize on that zeal is one of the most powerful things the UN can do. So I think when young people hold the bandwagon of getting in more young people, it becomes like a party, which is what we need to do at the UN. So I'm so glad that we're having this discussion, and I'm so glad, Felipe, that you are leading the vision to make young people a part of the UN agenda. And which is why actually I want to ask you, in the young people I meet today, I see that they have so many solutions, innovations, ideas on how we could solve the global challenges in front of us today. They wonder how can their priorities be heard and be a part of the UN agenda. So how can they go about that, and how can they ensure that their governments, their community, the thought leadership is engaged so that their priorities can be heard at the UN level?
Thank you, Prachi, and thank you for sharing your personal experience and background. And this is a dialogue, and this is also a listening platform in somehow for all of us, for the ones, and mostly I think for the ones that we are here being part of this conversation. So I will start like saying something that is obvious, but I think it's very important when you have the chance to be in some specific positions, no, that brings a lot of responsibility. But it's very clear to understand what's your role, no. So my role as head of the United Nations Youth Office is not about being the voice of young people in the UN, no. That's too big to be the role of one person. Of course, my personal experience and being in somehow young in some spaces I have the chance to be brings this with a different perspective. But my role and our roles as an office is to push the system so there are more spaces where young people can engage with this organization. And that is something that is not only about the global issues, it's about the regional and the local platforms, because that's where things really happen, no? So maybe my first example in how I can see young people can engage with the UN is raising your voices where you are.
For me, we just had a call with some fellows a couple of days ago where we were asked to share some of like the good stories that we believe that the UN has helped deliver. And I think all of those include young people. Like we were talking about the Paris Agreement. And that was something like climate activists all around the world have rallied and really moved countries forward to trying to think about what climate means for us and how we can protect our planet. There was Booty, who was talking, our fellow from the UAE, who was talking about the SDGs. The creation of the SDGs, again, there was a huge mobilization of young people around like, how can we create goals for humanity that unite us and that give us that hope that we can reach a world where there is less poverty or even no poverty, where there's gender equality, where we have good partnerships to achieve a better future. Daharia was talking about the first global agreement on ethics of AI. And I think AI is something that young people have really worked on and talked about a lot because it will impact our lives much more in the future. And there was also a lot of talk by fellows like Saru and Drubak on humanitarian aid and how the UN has really brought that to the forefront in different countries. And that goes to the answer to your second question about the impact on young people's lives. I read the book by Ban Ki-moon called Resolved, Uniting Nations in a Divided World. And he speaks about like when he was a child, how the UN helped him live and helped his family get out of a situation of war. And then he became the Secretary General. So like seeing that journey of him as a young person and how the UN impacted his life, and then he impacted so many more becoming the Secretary General, I think goes back to the topic of hope. So the UN has impacted young people's lives, and as young people, we're also impacting it. The fact that we're here today, I think, demonstrates that. And I think it would be great also to talk about other young people, and I know you've been having different conversations with them, so maybe I think we're nearing the end of our conversation. I think we could continue to talk about this much longer, but I would love to welcome Taylor back, as I believe you have one final question for us.
Yes, I think I can attest that everyone will be feeling the same, that I'm very sad to say that this session is coming to an end, and I have one final question that I would love to pose to each of you, while also thanking you for being so generous and open with your answers so far. And so that final question is, whose future are you fighting for specifically? And how does this shape the work that you will be embarking on over the years to come? Felipe, I'd love to pass to you first.
Okay, so thank you. And this is like a big one. So of course, when it's about our office and it's about our challenges, we have the responsibility of thinking globally, no, and big. So we are clear that we are pushing for a system that better reflects and has platforms for young people to be meaningfully engaged, which is a complex concept. Because it's not only about space, it's about accountability, it's about safety, it's about really being in the decision of the making. So we need to consider a lot of things when we are talking about this. We need to consider those that sometimes are leaving behind. We need to consider specifically the gender gaps. We need to consider that this should be safe spaces for people, no matter the language they speak or the religion they have. No, and that's maybe the central on what we are working and the direction in where we try to move.
Wow, amazing. I agree with so much of what you said, Felipe. And it reminded me of even your question, Taylor. It reminded me of when I was 18. I spent about 4 months visiting every slum in my city. And I was doing something very simple. I was documenting the dreams of children. You know, I was going to kids across the slums. I was asking them something very simple. What is your dream? And what do you want to be when you grow up? That experience never left me, because during the day I would visit these young, enthusiastic, bright children. I would have conversations with them. Someone would want to become a conductor. Somebody would dream of becoming a teacher. Someone would dream of becoming an engineer. Some of them dreamt of becoming comedians and artists. I would listen to their dreams, I would listen to their vision of the future. And then in the evening, I would come back to the foundation's office that I was working on, and I would face the grim statistics that most of these dreams were not going to have a fair chance at being met, because most of these children were going to drop out even before they could get to higher education. But the fact that they had dreams meant something. And that's what continues to drive me even today. Then the future I see for my country and for the world is where young people can dream big and have a fair chance at having their dreams met, where young people are ambitious, not just for themselves, but for their countries and for the world. A world where young people believe not in somebody else, but in their own ability to bring about change. And a world where each one of us is a change maker, where young people are not just spectators, but play an active role in shaping the world. That is the future I imagine, and that is the future all of us are working for, Inés, you, me, and Felipe. And that's what drives me.
Yeah, it's so great to see how we're all fighting for maybe someone's or multiple people's future. And when you said that question, Taylor, I was like, who? There are so many people. And I first thought you mentioned slum Prachi in Peru. When I was 15, I went and helped build a house in a shanty town. And there was this little girl called Mariluz. And she already spoke 3 languages, like our local language and Spanish, and was already starting to try and speak English with some foreigners who were there. And I was like, what future is she going to be living in this? We were making a prefabricated house. It was 8 meters wide, 3 meters long. It was really, really tiny. And so just thinking about her future and how can we make her future better? That's SDG 1, right? Reducing poverty. That's SDG 10, reducing inequalities. That will impact her life if we achieve it. Then last year, I was living in Sierra Leone, and actually, I unfortunately got a message today from a friend saying his niece's mom just passed away. So she passed away from malaria. Again, this is talking about health. So how can we make sure that the impact on this little girl's life of now not having a mother, because the context of her society means that this is still a threat? And now her uncle having to take care of her. And when we think about the future of the world, we're thinking about Africa becoming half of the global youth population by 2100. So this isn't just a future possibility, it's really a call to action to us as we're fighting for the future, that we're fighting for people's lives, and especially those in countries that are most vulnerable. And right now, I'm currently staying with a friend who has a 1.5-year-old called Olivia from Mexico, but she's living in France. She has the possibility for education. She has the possibility to have good healthcare and so on. But if she were in Mexico, maybe the situation would be harder. Her mom was just sharing with me that she would be scared that she could be kidnapped, for instance. And so all the futures that we're fighting for, what you shared, Felipe, what you shared, Prachi, and what everyone probably on the call is thinking of someone right now, that's what we are fighting for today. And that hope that you shared, Prachi, and that you picked on Felipe, I think is what we all have and what is driving us. And I know we still have stuff on the agenda, so I'll pass back to Taylor because I know there's stuff to come and more inspiration as well.
Oh, wow. Look, I have to say that this is truly everything that was just discussed is truly what the Engine Room is all about, building a movement of young change makers who are driven by the fight for our collective future and the ambition to build a more inclusive and resilient world for all generations. It shows that whether you're just starting out your change-making journey or you hold one of the most prominent youth enablement roles that we have in the world, that you are an important part to play in this fight for people and planet as we approach the summit of the future. So my sincerest gratitude to Inés, to Prachi, to Felipe. It's been incredible to listen to everything that you've had to share. It's been insightful and inspiring, and I hope that we can now carry this sense of purpose and ambition that you have gifted us with into our next segment, where we're going to dive into the vision and strategy of the 2024 Engine Room for the future. So please join me in sharing a final thank you with our wonderful guests via the chat as we prepare to show you how you can get involved and be part of bringing the 2100 roadmap to life.